As we get ready for week 13 and get you ready for the fantasy football playoffs, we're going to have to help you set some lineups, especially wide receiver. Going to be some tough decisions to make this week. We're going to go through every matchup and let you know who should be in or out. Going to be without some key players because there are 6 teams on bye in week 13. That would be the Buffalo Bills, Baltimore Ravens, New York Giants, Minnesota Vikings, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Chicago Bears. If you have these receivers, don't worry, they are must starts no matter what. Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, Keenan Allen, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. We're going to go through every matchup starting with that Thursday night tilt between Seattle and Dallas. But first, quick reminder that if you haven't tried Underdog Fantasy, now is the perfect time to do it because in addition to that 100% deposit match that you get just for signing up using promo code ENDGAME, that means every dollar you put in, up to $100 when you first sign up, you get it matched by Underdog. And then you also get a free pick'em. That's Dak Prescott on Thursday, just going higher than zero point 0.5 total yards. You get that free pick, you pair it with any other pick you like, and you can triple your money just like that. And you've already doubled it just for becoming a customer. So check it out right now, Underdog Fantasy. Just make sure you use promo code ENDGAME. So let's start with that Thursday matchup. Seahawks at Cowboys. Start with DK Metcalf. Can he do something against this Dallas secondary?
I mean, maybe. You don't know how strongly I want to say no to DK Metcalf this week on the road against the Cowboys with Pumpkin Geno Smith, but I get it. It's DK Metcalf. He could score. He could maybe do something. So I will reluctantly put him in the start him if you need him category.
I mean, you definitely have to be worried. You know, DK is the kind of guy who could always score a touchdown, make a big play, but those have been kind of fewer and far between this season. You've got to be concerned. I'll say he's a flex option, but a risky one. What about Tyler Lockett? Seems to get a steadier target share. Do you feel better about him?
I mean, I probably feel a little bit better about him, but I still don't really want to start him in this matchup on the road in Dallas. But again, if you need him, you can start him.
I do feel better. I think maybe more like the wide receiver 3 range because he operates out of the slot a lot. I think he'll get more targets, but again, I don't know if I feel like a big game. What about the rookie, Jackson Smith and Jigba?
Okay, here I'm going to say no. I mean, if I barely am starting DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, I can't start Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, just when it looked like he was kind of leading the way in target share, then he started to drop again. The ceiling just isn't there. In this matchup, I'll just say no to. And on the Dallas side, we have to look again at Brandon Cooks. He continues to produce. Does he do it in week 13?
I mean, can't like him nearly as much as last week. And it wasn't like he caught a ton of passes. He had that big, long touchdown, which he can do. But this isn't the Commanders. It's the Seahawks. They've got a better secondary. I think I have to sit Brandon Cooks this week.
I've got a little more optimism. Again, I know that he's not in a smash spot. But look, you're looking for a flex with some upside. He's been catching touchdowns, even besides against Washington. So I don't love him, but I think he's still a solid flex option. Now the Chargers going to take on the Patriots. Not a lot of wide receivers to be interested in this game besides Keenan Allen. But let's start with Josh Palmer because even though he hasn't played for several weeks, he could be activated this week. If that happens, do you feel good enough to roll him out?
I mean, you can't feel great, but on the other hand, it's like, look at this receiving group. Like you said, it's Keenan Allen and then nobody. They need Josh Palmer. So I think if he's activated, it's the Patriots. The Chargers basically are backs against a wall. You got to think they're going to come out all guns blazing. So if he's activated and he plays, I think he's at least startable if you need him.
I mean, I'd have to hear that he's a full go, right? No concerns, no restrictions, a week of practice. If so, I do think he is startable, especially because Quentin Johnson, besides just looking bad, also left with an injury in week 12. Not sure his status. Yeah, they kind of need Palmer, but of course, we don't know what to expect from this offense ever. So, risky, but potential high upside streamer. And then you like to say in New England, at least there's Demario Douglas, but we don't know if we'll get Demario Douglas because he suffered an injury in week 12 also. If he plays, is he playable in fantasy?
I think he's playable. It was a head injury, which I'm not trying to make light of it, but at least, if he plays and he clears, it's not like he's dealing with a knee or a hamstring or an ankle or something like that. It's a great matchup against the Chargers. The problem is he's on the Patriots, and what is the upside here? So just a floor play in a PPR league.
Exactly. I mean, if you really are looking around, you're like, I just need someone to get me some points. Okay, Douglas can do that. Just recognize that the upside is limited. All right, the Lions going to take on the Saints this week. You're good with the Sun God. Are you good with Jameson Williams?
I'm never good with Jameson Williams. I mean, even when he randomly catches a touchdown, I don't regret not starting him. I don't think I'm ever going to regret not starting him. I'm not starting him this week.
Yeah, and I don't think I have said, yes, start Jameson Williams once this season. I don't think I will. So I'm going to say pass. Now on the New Orleans side, things are getting dicey at receiver. Chris Olave, just when he was in the middle of a monster game, left early in Week 12 with a concussion. So if he does clear the protocol and he does play, is he a guy you're putting out there?
Yeah, in fact, I mean, if he clears the protocol, again, like I said with Demario Douglas, it's not a knee, not an ankle, not a hamstring, so he'll be at 100% performance. Against this Lions secondary that looks terrible, all of a sudden just made Christian Watson a thing. I mean, Chris Olave, if he plays, is a borderline must start this week.
Agree. I mean, he's been good all season. People probably don't realize that he's been pretty solid. Yeah, with all the other injuries, which we'll talk about in New Orleans, if he plays, you definitely start him. Now, if he doesn't play, Rashid Shaheed already most likely to be out. Michael Thomas definitely out. What if we see A.T. Perry, the rookie, as the number one receiver in New Orleans? Is that enough to make him startable?
I mean, he could always hit a big play because, again, it's the Lions, and for some reason this secondary is not very good all of a sudden the last few weeks. But still, I mean, he's hardly been involved. He's a rookie. I can't do it. I'd have to be, beyond desperate to put A.T. Perry in my lineup.
Well, here's the problem. As much as I think Perry should be more involved, he wasn't last week. Even with those other injuries we mentioned, only got 2 targets. They're bringing other guys off the bench like Keith Kirkwood, Lynn Bowden Jr. And you know what? These receivers being gone might not make Perry good. It just might make this offense bad. So as much as I'd like to recommend Perry, I'll just say he's a guy just to watch. We've got the Falcons at the Jets. Not sure how many fireworks we'll have in the passing game here. But there's Drake London. He's good. He's the number one receiver for the Falcons, but he's going against the Jets.
Yeah, had a nice game last week. Liked him, 90 yards. But now Sauce Gardner, Desmond Ridder on the road. I think I have to sit Drake London this week.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to trust London even in good matchups. Against Sauce, sit unless you really have nobody better. In a very similar situation, Garrett Wilson, super talented young receiver with a super bad quarterback situation in offense. Is he any better?
I mean, I think he's better because we know he's going to get tons of targets at least. But, man, he's going to see A.J. Terrell this week. He saved his day with a garbage touchdown last week. I mean, you're really risking it here, but I think he's at least, start him if you need him category.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put him a little bit higher than London, but I mean, really, Tim Boyle, only a desperation streamer. Next up, the Cardinals taking on the Steelers in Pittsburgh. Hollywood Brown looked more like Hollywood last week. Finally catching some passes, looked healthy. Are you back in on Hollywood this week?
I think you have to be. It's weird. He didn't practice all week with the heel. We were like, ooh, man, this isn't good. Will he even play? And then he goes out there and has his best game with Kyler Murray and his best game in 5 weeks. So there you go. But he looked good. It's a good matchup against the Steelers. I think for the most part, Hollywood Brown is a solid start this week.
Yeah, whatever happened before game time, it worked. This is what we've been waiting for and expecting since Kyler Murray returned. So if he's healthy and he's good to go and he looked the way he looked last week, then yeah, I'm in on Hollywood and I say he's a strong start. And then Greg Dortch has been filling in as number 2 guy. Michael Wilson might be out again. So how do we feel about Dortch in this matchup?
I mean, you can't feel as good. He did catch that touchdown, but I mean, it's not like he's getting peppered with targets here, picking up huge gains. So, I mean, if you need him, you can start him because it is a good matchup, but that's it.
Yeah, still mostly a floor play in PPR. So I'd say he's not the worst option if you need a flex, but, again, just kind of a safe pick. And then what about Rondale Moore?
Yeah, not doing it. I mean, this guy is, I don't even know. Like, I was going to say touchdown or bust, but is there even that? Like, not starting Rondell Moore.
No, I just really can't get behind Rondell. I don't know what it is, but Rondell Moore just doesn't excite me enough. The consistent usage is never there, so I'll just say no. All right, what about Deontay Johnson, who looked pretty disinterested at times in the game last week? Does he recover this week?
I mean, he should. It's the Cardinals. He should be better. This offense, over 400 yards of offense. Of course, it all went to Pat Freiermuth and Najee Harris, but, he should be better. I think he's, at least this week, is a decent start.
I always feel like he should do better than he actually does. It's such a great matchup. I mean, I don't know what we'll get from him, but I guess I have to say he's still startable in PPR. And then George Pickens, the rumors of him being heavily involved were greatly exaggerated. Does he get more involved this week?
It's funny that Ian Rappaport tweet, he said Jaylen Warren is going to get way more touches and George Pickens are going to feature him, and then it was Najee Harris and Pat Freiermuth. But anyways, maybe he always can hit a big play. It's the Cardinals. I mean, there's upside here. So, again, I'm going to say he's a decent start because of that upside.
I mean, if there's a week for him to smash, this would be it. But can you really trust it? Look, I'll say if you're looking for upside, you got, bye week fill-in that you need because you have Stephon Diggs or, one of these other guys that's not playing. Go for the upside. Shoot for Pickens. Why not? All right, Colts at the Titans. Important game for both these teams if they want to stay in the playoff hunt. What do we feel about Michael Pittman at Tennessee?
I mean, how do you not feel good about Michael Pittman? Why do we still get so many Michael Pittman questions? He's been awesome almost the whole year, and now he gets the Titans. You got to start Michael Pittman this week.
Yeah, I mean, very borderline. It's just a no-brainer. You kind of have to start him against this Titans secondary. Look, you definitely want him in your lineup, and I'll tell you what, if you look, again, this early line on Underdog, 67.5 receiving yards. That's not a high threshold for a number one receiver, but especially looking at the way he smashed last week, the way he's been pretty much all year. The target share is there, and this week the matchup is there. Definitely take the higher on that. So look, if you're just now ready to sign up for Underdog for the first time, you take that Pittman pick. You combine it with the free pick, essentially, that I mentioned earlier, going higher for just getting 1 yard on Dak. And then that's a good chance to just win your very first pick 'em on Underdog. So try it out. And then you feel just as good about Josh Downs, who didn't quite smash because he was inches away from a touchdown, but got a ton of targets too last week.
Yeah, 13 targets, tied with Michael Pittman. It's the Titans. I know he didn't have a big game last week, but you got to feel good about him again this week. I think he's a solid start.
Absolutely. Still keeping some trust in him. Again, the targets are there. The matchup is just as good this week, so I think he's a very high upside receiver. And then there's DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, clearly the number one receiver there, but does it really matter?
No, doesn't matter. I mean, it's a good matchup against the Colts, but what is the upside here? Will Levis doesn't throw touchdowns. He doesn't throw for yards. If they score, it's probably going to be Derrick Henry. I mean, you're really just banking. It's touchdown or bust for DeAndre Hopkins, and most weeks it's been bust. I'm not starting him.
Well, I won't say no to him because if there's a game where he could do something, this is it. They're at home. Titans much better at home. The Colts, not the best secondary. I feel like this is a decent matchup for him, but I'll say he's just kind of in the wide receiver 3 range for me. All right, next we got the Dolphins at the Commanders. Could be a lot of fancy points scored in this game, especially by the receivers. Let's start with Jaylen Waddle.
Yeah, you got to like Jaylen Waddle. Came through in that matchup last week against the Jets. Now gets the Commanders. I mean, this is almost as good as it gets. You have to start Jaylen Waddle.
Yeah, it seems almost too obvious. Terrible secondary, really talented receiver, finally kind of coming through with a big game. I mean, look, not a guarantee he'll smash, but I'll take the chance. I'm starting Waddle everywhere I got him. Now, on the Commander side, not so obvious which of these guys will have a big game, if any. Let's start with Terry McLaurin.
I mean, does Terry McLaurin ever have big games? He hasn't gone over 90 yards since week 13 of last year. So, hey, it's week 13. Maybe this is the week. A year later, he finally does it again. But, I mean, I still, for the most part, think he's an okay start this week. But I don't know if there's a lot of upside.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds weird to say Commanders might have to throw it a lot. But I feel like Terry's just almost more of a floor play these days. So he's startable, but again, I can't feel like I love him. And then Jahan Dotson, I mean, boom or bust, who knows with this guy?
Yeah, boom or bust. But even his booms aren't like huge. So if you need him, if you're looking for that touchdown potential, sure, but that's it.
Well, he's not the worst dice roll for me. I mean, I kind of put him up there with like George Pickens. It's a good spot for him. He's a great talent, but you just don't know. Just don't know if they're going to even target him, what he's going to do. So I love the upside. I'm scared of the low floor. So I guess proceed at your own risk. But what about Curtis Samuel, who was the leading receiver last week, had a 100-yard game? Is he going to be the best play out of these receivers?
I mean, crazily enough, he might be the one I feel the best about. He's actually the one, when he's been healthy, that is leading this team in the target share. It's crazy. So, look, I think Sam Howell's going to have to throw a lot. I don't think Curtis Samuel has the highest ceiling, but I think he at least gives you a decent floor. So I think this week he's an okay start.
That makes sense because if you look at Dolphins defense, got two really good corners with Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard. Samuel kind of working in the slot of the backfield might be the guy they go to the most, but who knows? So again, a risky flex option. Broncos taking on the Texans. Let's start with Courtland Sutton. Just cannot stop scoring touchdowns. Does he do it again?
Maybe. I mean, they're probably going to have to throw a lot. They're in Houston. You got to think CJ Stroud and this offense is going to put up points against them. He's certainly been involved. I mean, he doesn't need a ton of catches to have fantasy value, so I certainly think this week he is startable.
I think so. I mean, I feel like they're going to have to pass the ball a lot here to keep up with Houston. Sutton has been almost as consistent as you get this year. Not the highest ceiling, but still, there's something to be said for that, knowing that you're going to get some points. I like Sutton as a solid wide receiver 3, like usual. And then there's Jerry Jeudy. I don't feel nearly as good about him.
No, I mean, not only do you not have to start Jerry Jeudy, you don't have to roster Jerry Jeudy anymore.
But now we got the Texans receivers. Let's start with Nico Collins. Huge week 12. At home. Does he have a huge week 13?
Yeah, I don't feel nearly as good about him. Patrick Surtain, probably going to get a lot of Surtain this week. But he's at home. He's been good. I think he's still a decent start, but I am a little nervous this week.
Yeah, exactly. This Denver defense, you have to give them credit, has been much better over the last few games, which is why they're winning. Collins is definitely still startable, but I'm not going to call a big game for him this week. So more like a flex option. I do feel a little bit better about Tank, but where do you put him?
Yeah, I feel better about Tank than Nico this week because he shouldn't get as much Surtain. He's got potential, right? He's got upside, but again, this Broncos secondary has been mostly good this year. So again, I'm going to call him like a solid start this week.
That feels about right. I mean, definitely a guy you can feel good about starting. Just don't feel a huge game. All right, now let's talk Panthers at Bucks. New head coach. What does that mean for Adam Thielen?
I don't know if it means anything for Adam Thielen. This is a great matchup, but it was a great matchup last week too, and he had one catch. So, I mean, I guess he's got a floor. I think he still has a floor. I guess we'll find out after this week. But, man, I can only put him in the start him if you need him category.
Well, he is tapering off a little bit now. And, things could change if they decide to try more young players. But, look, because of the matchup, it's the Bucs secondary. I still feel like Thielen's a solid start in PPR just because of the matchup. And look, Bryce Young needs somebody to throw to. Although we did see a little bit more Jonathan Mingo last week. Not a huge game, but 4 catches, 60 yards. For anybody not named Thielen on the Panthers, that's pretty good. Do you think he gets more involved?
I mean, maybe, like you said, maybe they decide, hey, let's get these young players some looks, because that's really what they should be doing here, right? I mean, there's no need to, look at this 33-year-old veteran wide receiver who we've already seen for many years, so. But that being said, is that what I'm banking on in my fantasy lineup? No, I'm going to sit him.
Maybe this is being a little too optimistic. I think he's streamable, just again, because there's several teams on bye. I talked about the guys like the George Pickens and the DeAndre Hopkins, these guys who have upside, potential for big play. I put Mingo a step below those guys because those guys are proven receivers, but I think he is an interesting streamer. And then there's Mike Evans for Tampa Bay. I can't really think of a reason not to start him.
Exactly. At this point, he should just be in your lineup pretty much every week.
Yeah, against Carolina, definitely. And don't forget, revenge game for Baker Mayfield. What about Chris Godwin? Hasn't put up nearly the numbers of Evans. Is he still startable?
I mean, barely in your PPR leagues. It's like Baker loves Mike Evans, right? So he's got a floor in PPR leagues, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's just weird. Don't know why he's not doing better. Still startable, but again, just a floor play. Cleveland Browns going to take on the Rams on the road this week. A lot of question marks in this one for the Cleveland side. So let's start with Amari Cooper, left with a rib injury. X-rays came back negative, but not guaranteed that he'll play. So if he does, are you worried about him enough to sit him?
I mean, you have to be. I've been worried about him the last two games. I said sit him both those games, and I haven't regretted it. And I don't think I'm going to regret it this week. I don't know who's going to be the quarterback at this point. We have no idea who it's going to be, but I don't think it matters. I cannot play Amari Cooper right now.
Yeah, I mean, I said that, and I remembered, well, we pretty much sat him anyways, right? Because this Cleveland offense is just not the same. This is just pushes it over the edge. He's basically unstartable, even if he plays. So we do have to talk about Elijah Moore. He's been getting targets, but what if Cooper is completely out? And also, what if Joe Flacco is at quarterback? Yes, Joe Flacco might be the quarterback for Cleveland because DTR is hurt. PJ Walker is just not good. Do you have interest in Elijah Moore then?
I mean, not really. I mean, are we just banking on Joe Flacco coming in and relentlessly targeting Elijah Moore and him picking up yards? I can't. Let me see it first before I put him in my lineup. It's week 13. Like, you might be in a must-win. I'm not starting Elijah Moore.
I mean, it could happen, but yeah, are you going to risk your fantasy fortunes on it this late in the season? Nah, you probably shouldn't. I mean, at least Moore's getting targets, but the ceiling it has to be low. So probably just sit Moore. And then we did see Cedric Tillman get a big uptick in targets last week. I guess it's the same situation. If you're not starting Moore, you probably can't start Tillman.
Yeah, look, I like Tillman. I want to see how he finishes the season, but with all this uncertainty, this offense can't do it.
Can you start Cooper Kupp? Is a legitimate question at this point. I mean, the ankle, the lack of targets, what's going on?
I don't know, but that was the Cardinals, and it was like the first catch. He was already getting his ankle looked at again. He hasn't been good since like the middle of October. Now it's the Browns. I know you see the name Cooper Kupp and you think, you got to start Cooper Kupp. Well, I don't think you have to. In fact, I am not starting Cooper Kupp this week. I'm not doing it. How many times are you going to put the 3 or 4 points in your lineup not starting Cooper Kupp?
I have to agree. I mean, again, the numbers, the recent performance, the injury concern, you're really defying logic if you put Kupp in your lineup. So maybe he does something, but even so, what's the upside? So I think this week you just have to sit him and hope for better things the rest of the way. Now, if Kupp doesn't play, does that mean you want to start Puka, or is he also too risky?
I mean, I barely want to start Puka. I was looking at it. He really has not been good since week 5. He had that one big game where he went for like 100-something yards, but he hasn't topped 71 yards in a game since then. I mean, yeah, he's got some touchdowns here and there, but again, it's the Browns. It's a great defense. Maybe he scores. Maybe he does okay. I'm not going to say he's an outright bench like Kupp because at least Puka is healthy, but more like a start him if you need him only.
Yeah, I mean, we really have to stop clinging to the memories of the early season. What he's done lately, not that much. So, like you said, flex if you don't have anybody better, but that's it. 49ers taking on the Eagles. Could be the game of the week here. Let's start with Brandon Ayuk. I mean, you always feel good starting him. Do you feel good in this matchup, though?
Gotta feel good about him. I really like Brandon Ayuk this week. He's going to be on the Booms video if you want to watch that later in the week. But Eagles play a ton of man. Ayuk destroys man. This is going to be a high-scoring game. Game of the week for sure. I'm starting Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, there's some players you just don't need to worry too much about the matchup. But this matchup isn't as bad as it seems because despite their record, Eagles just don't shut out wide receivers. So I think you got to start Ayuk. And though I don't feel as good about him, I still feel like Debo could be in line for a big game too.
Definitely. He could always run in a touchdown, right? Take a screen to the house. I think in this matchup, you got Debo, you're starting him.
And, I mean, that probably goes for Devontae Smith too, but what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's actually been better than A.J. Brown the last 2 games without Dallas Goedert. And when you look at this 49ers, like, yeah, they've got a strong defense, but they give up plays to this, in the secondary. They give up to the wide receivers. I know they didn't last week, but that was the Seahawks and Geno Smith. This is Jalen Hurts. You got to like Devonta Smith this week.
Exactly. Look, even if Goddard comes back, it's not like Smith all of a sudden isn't going to get targeted. This guy can go off for a big game anytime. If you have Smith, for the most part, you just start him. Then we got the Chiefs at the Packers, rematch of the very first Super Bowl. Let's talk about a rookie, Rashee Rice. I mean, just when it looked like he was kind of hitting the wall, nope, saw a huge surge in usage, had a big week 12. Does this encourage you for week 13?
It does, but you also have to be a little cautious here because we've seen this before where it looked like he was starting to tick up and then he ticked back down. But who do they really have to throw to right now? I mean, nobody. So it's not as good of a matchup as he had last week. The Packers secondary at the same time hasn't been great. So I think Rashee Rice is at least a good start this week.
Yeah, the signs were encouraging enough that you should feel fine starting him in PPR. You can't assume he'll just smash from here on out. I don't think it's as good a matchup, like you said. But again, there's not as many receivers that have his kind of upside who are available this week. So I think he's a pretty solid flex. Then Justin Watson went the other way just when he saw a surge in targets last week. Let down. Just had that really short touchdown. Does he do any better?
Who knows? I mean, you're really gambling here if you're going to put Justin Watson in your lineup. It's desperation, boom bust type of flex play.
Which is pretty much what he's been all season. So yeah, I think you just have to consider him a desperation streamer. And now we have to talk about Christian Watson. Are you buying into last week's results or are you just keeping him on your bench?
Yeah, I'm not buying in. I mean, sure, he had a nice game, but, still only 7 targets. I know it's not terrible, but it's not like he got, force-fed targets and had this huge, 100-plus yard game. He had that nice long touchdown, another nice long catch, which he can do. But this is the Chiefs. This is a very good secondary. Look what they just did to Devontae Adams. So if you need him, you can start him, but that's as high as I can go.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's not many guys out there who have his kind of upside, just period. But this isn't the best matchup. So I'd say he's playable, but I do think you should hold on to him or pick him up if he's out there because the schedule after week 13 is just so favorable for the Packers passing game. So start him only if you need him this week. Now what about Jayden Reed?
Yeah, I like Jayden Reed. He's been solid for 3 straight games. He's a good receiver. He gets run out of the slot. Can't love him this week. Again, it's the Chiefs. They're a great defense. But I think this week he's at least, a startable flex type of option.
I really like the ways they're using him. Yeah, in the backfield, moving around a lot. So he's definitely become the number one guy there. I don't think he has the high ceiling, but I think he's earned the right to be called a wide receiver 3 in PPR leagues. And then there's Romeo Doubs. I mean, still touchdown or bust?
Yeah, I mean, did nothing last week. If he doesn't score, he doesn't really give you a lot. So not starting Romeo Doubs.
I mean, there's only so many targets to go around in this offense. Watson's coming on, Reed's coming on, Doubs is kind of falling to the wayside. So I'll just say no, you can sit him. And then the Bengals are going to take on the Jaguars Monday night. Jamar Chase, not a must start, but look, he did come through for the most part last week. Is he still a strong consideration?
No, I mean, got very lucky with a couple of those catches last week. Did have that nice long catch, I'll give him that. And he's still a talented player, so... But, I mean, it's on the road against Jacksonville. I can only put him in, the decent type of start this week.
I mean, yeah, I get all that. But he's a guy who... He can make a play if needed. But, I mean, we've said this. You got to look at him kind of like a Garrett Wilson. He might thrive in spite of his situation at quarterback. But you're taking the risk that he does nothing. So... upside flex play, that's it. Now, Calvin Ridley, is he finally breaking out of this inconsistent pattern of usage? Is it the Zay Jones thing? What is it?
I don't know, but whatever it is, it's working. Maybe it's just Trevor Lawrence, right? Trevor Lawrence has been awesome the last 2 weeks. And there's no reason to think Trevor Lawrence won't be awesome again this week at home against this Bengals defense. So I think if you got Ridley, you just keep rolling with him.
Yeah, well, saw some numbers that said that, the way that he was being used and the routes he was running, the Jaguars maybe kind of figured out how to use him in a more effective way. Look, whatever it is, it's working. I think Ridley has enough upside. You got to start him. And then Christian Kirk, same thing. I mean, I feel like you have Christian Kirk. You just kind of start him and take what you get.
Yeah, he hasn't been fantastic lately, but he also hasn't been bad. So I agree. You got Christian Kirk, you're pretty much starting him.
All right, now you know who to start or sit at wide receiver. We got you covered at running back, quarterback, tight end, everything you need to win in fantasy. Check out our Week 13 playlist right here.